bringing you in-depth discussion from one of the rad groups of online writers covering the Edmonton Oilers. Are you ready for Oilers Overtime? Join us as we talk news, rumors, trades, player grades, game results, and more. All featured on one of the most glorified teams in the NHL. From the great one to the next one. From the boys on the bus to the decade of darkness. This is Oilers Overtime.
Hey there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. My name is Jim Parsons. I'm back this week. I wasn't feeling so hot last week. Still got a little bit of a cold this week, so I sound a little funky. I'm like the sexy Phoebe Cates in or Phoebe Buffet in Friends, you know, when she's singing in the Central Perk and she loves her own voice and she's like, oh, why does my cold have to go away? Anyway, probably not at all like that. But we're going to do another edition of the show. We've got our regular cast. Everybody's with us tonight. Colton Pankew's here. Colton, how are you?
Aside from the Oilers stressing me out, I'm not too bad, Jim. How about you?
Not too bad. I mean, yeah, it's no fun, right? 6 losses in a row, not what anybody expected. I'm sure we all thought they might lose a couple after going 9-1 and then 16-5, but 6 in a row is pretty harsh. So we're going to talk a lot about that tonight. We'll see how depressing this show will get. Hey, Brian Swain is with us as well. Brian, how are you?
Hey, good, Jim. Welcome back. Think the good friend reference there. I like that.
I what did I say? Phoebe Cates? Isn't that the chick from Ridgemont High? Isn't
Phoebe
like
Cates,
the dream sequence that everybody loved so much when you were growing up as a kid? I don't know. I must be dating myself right now. But anyway, yes, Phoebe Buffet is what I meant. Yes, from Friends.
I'm dating myself enough by knowing who Phoebe Buffet is anyway, right? So
that's right. Yeah. And Julia Mongillo is with us. He was gracious enough to host last week. I appreciate you doing that, buddy. How are you?
Good. Glad to have you back. I'm doing a little better than you guys. Got my new backdrop in place. So, yeah, looking good.
Yeah, by the way, on you for like cheering for Toronto yesterday. As we record this, he says on Twitter, he goes, you know what? I know I do the Oilers show, but I'm a Toronto guy. So I guess I got to cheer for Toronto. What am I going to do?
Yeah.
They won 5-1, by the way. And you probably, I mean, you didn't jinx it, but I like to just.
Yeah, you can blame it on me. I don't mind.
That's right. Well, I guess we should start. I don't know where to start. I mean, hopefully it's not that terrible a show in terms of our mood and what we're talking about here, because there are a lot of positives that we can take out of this season so far. But let's start with the really crappy thing. I want to get your guys' opinion on this. Colin, I'll start with you. What do you think about the jersey on the ice thing? It's like, is it a Canadian thing to do? Is it like there's 5 teams that this always happens with? I mean, we're talking 6 losses in a row. It sucks, but it's not like, oh my God, this team is incredibly bad, down at the bottom, lottery draft, kind of whatever. Does it really deserve a jersey getting thrown on the ice?
Well, no. I mean, I remember like years ago, there was one at the Oilers game when they were really struggling, and that was the first time I'd ever seen that. And then it seems like this season, especially, it's become trendy. Like we've seen it in like Toronto. I think Vancouver did it. Like there's a few Canadian teams already. So, I mean, I think it's crazy regardless of how bad your team is, just how expensive it is to get a jersey these days. But I think it's kind of just become a thing that's more trendy than anything else. The Oilers are in a funk right now, but I don't think it's worth throwing your jersey on the ice over.
Well, how many teams have done it now this year? I mean, didn't Toronto do one? Vancouver did one for sure, right? They talked about that one a lot. Like, it's like the thing to do now, but it's like the lamest thing to do in the world. I just don't. I mean, I get where you're coming from. They're like $300 to buy a jersey nowadays, right? So why would you throw that on the ice? Then again, I'm so cheap. I don't like throwing hats on the ice for hat tricks either. So it's what it is. Julia, what do you think about the jersey?
I mean, yeah, like you guys said, they're expensive. So I definitely wouldn't throw this like any jersey on the ice, especially the one I'm wearing right now. But you know, I hope it was a fake one at least if he was going to chuck it on there. But we've seen it with 3 Canadian teams now, and I think it's worked well. So maybe this is the karma they needed to go the other way, because every team who's thrown one on the ice, the Leafs did it early in the season when they off to a slow start. They turned it around. Vancouver seems to have turned it around for them. So, I mean, it seems like the new fad, and maybe it'll work in the Oilers' favor in the next coming days.
Are you suggesting it's like a coincidence sort of wishbone thing, or that it actually affects the players and they look at it and they go, this is embarrassing, we need to do something? Like, do you think that's what it is, and it actually snaps them into playing better?
I mean, I think that's rock bottom. I think when the jersey gets thrown, that's when players are you know, at the lowest point and say, okay, this is like gone too far now, because they're already frustrated. They can't be fun walking into the rink when you're on a 5-game losing streak going down 3-0 against Toronto and you're like, what do we do now? Like you got to have some sort of like defeat, right? And when that happens, that just brings it to a whole nother level, puts everything into perspective, I think. So I think it does kind of snap them into place and say, you know what, like just some sort of realization where we got to be better for not only ourselves, but more or less for the fans that are, paying to come and watch us.
Brian, do you think it affects the players like Julian's suggesting, or do you think it's one of those things they just sort of ignore and go, what sort of idiot would do that? Like, what does it mean when that happens? Nothing anymore?
Well, I think it's much to do about nothing, but I do actually think it does kind of offend them. Like, I think there's this symbolic nature about treating the jersey that way. It's kind of like the same thing of walking on a logo, the team's logo on the carpet in the dressing room, right? It's just something you don't do. And yeah, I like I said, to me, it's not a biggie, but I think it was, I can't remember who was in the post-game presser last night. It might have been Colton Stevie, who kind of seemed a little put off. But remember the first time that happened, was it Scrivens was in goal?
Yeah,
and he got hit
it up
so
or something,
wound up
didn't
that he was legit upset about that. So I think there just is something about it's Julian said, like, it's kind of it's a symbol of hitting rock bottom. Now, whether that's actually the case or not, but I think it's just you don't do that to a sweater. A lot of people feel that way, and I think that's an actual real thing with some of these players.
Sure. I mean, there's definitely something to the whole idea of what the sweater means, right? Like, they had all these conversations about the ads on the jerseys and how they didn't want to do that, and they didn't want to deface the tradition or the whatever of the jerseys, right? So I get that for sure. I just wonder nowadays if the players actually are kind of like whatever, or if they are really bothered by it. I mean, they got to know they're not playing well, right? So yeah. It's not like and they're not even actually playing that bad. They didn't even play that bad against Toronto. They just didn't capitalize on their opportunities, and Toronto did, right?
I think the more it happens, it loses its meaning too. It's like people storming the court in college basketball after they upset somebody. You're storming the field in college football. It's like eventually it gets done so much it doesn't really mean anything anymore. So
yeah, well, it's probably not it's a decent transition. Maybe I'll start with Julian on this one. Is this as bad as it looks? Like, they've lost 6 in a row, which nobody ever wants to lose 6 in a row. But is it that bad? Like, if the Oilers played that badly, is this like, oh my God, the end of the world? Or is it just kind of like, look, it is what it is. It's a little bit of a run here. They could snap out of it and win 6 in a row. Like, how do you view this as an Oilers fan, or as a secondary Oilers fan?
Yeah. So we kind of touched on this last week a little bit, where we're saying, like, what are they? Like, are they real? Or are they not real? But I'm starting to see, like, we talked about it, where are they that much different from last year? Like, what did they add that was so significant to make the team better? Like, they did address some of their defensive issues, which have helped. But you kind of still see those flaws where, like, that second goal where Simmons is front of the net against the Leafs, like, there's 3 Oilers around him and there's almost 2 Leafs in the slot ready to bang away at a puck. So, there's some defensive miscues that are still going on, which, I mean, those are going to happen. But in terms of just, I think that they haven't really improved much, and goaltending has been the same, and if not worse, because, Mike Smith hasn't been around like he was last year. And they haven't really addressed that need at all. And that's one of the ones that we were talking about over the offseason that needed to be addressed. And it hasn't yet. So I'm starting to see that there's these flaws, like that third line center spot. They haven't gotten much from any of their depth. Like, I talked about it last episode, and it's they need a top 6 forward to play on the third line to give them some scoring help, because there's no depth when McDavid and Draisaitl are dry, which they have been these last 4 games now. 3 out of 4 games they've had no points. So when they're dry, nobody else is getting the job done.
Okay, hold that thought, because I'm going to come back to you about what to do. Like, you talk about what they need, but what would you do? I'm going to ask you that in a little bit. But Colton, I want to get your take on how bad this 6-game skid is. Like, is it kind of like Holland needs to have a presser and talk about his offseason moves and what to do next and whether or not they need to add, or is it just a matter of waiting? Because as Julian pointed out, Leon Draisaitl, I think of 4 out of 6 games didn't have a point. McDavid had like 5 total in 6 games, considering what he's been doing in the past. Like, is it just a matter of waiting for those guys to sort of get it back again? Because everybody's going to have a little rough patch. We've seen it with everybody. Or is it actually that big a deal?
Well, I think you can look at it both ways. Like, I do think they'll turn it around because of McDavid and Draisaitl. But at the same time, I think that's the problem with this team is when they go into these slumps, they can't win games. So I do think it's concerning just this big of a losing streak. I do wonder, like, there's not a lot of guys who have winning experience at the NHL level, like deep players that have been on cup runs and things like that can kind of calm everyone down. So I'm kind of wondering, like, you just hope they don't get too negative in there and then it just kind of keeps rolling. Like, I'm hoping that they can really just grab one win right away here and then kind of turn things around, because it is getting to the point that it has to be weighing on them. Like, Draisaitl's in a big slump, like you said. McDavid's not playing like himself, and it seems like if those two aren't at the top of their game, they can't win. So I do think they'll be able to turn around and get into the playoffs, but I'm still really concerned about the overall depth.
Well, you brought up the negativity, and actually, when people see this video, I'm going to have an article that comes out on the Hockey Writers around the same time about the difference between frustration and negativity. And both Glenn Gulletson, who's now kind of co-coaching with Dave Tippett out, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins talked about that today on the day that we're shooting this, about how frustration is not the worst thing in the world. It's annoying and they're angry and whatever, but they're not negative. They're not worried so much. Brian, do you think that's lip service, or do you think that they are actually different than they were 4 years ago when they might go through a skid like this and like the sky was falling? Now it's kind of like, you know what, we're better than this. Like, we know we're better than this. We have the ability to turn this around. We're annoyed and frustrated, but we're not really worried that we were, 11-5 now or 16-5 now we're 16-11. Like, what do you think they're thinking in the room right now?
I think they think they're different. We'll find out when the rubber hits the road, right? Like, I do think they genuinely believe that, but okay, now it's put up or shut up time. We'll find out if they are different than those teams from, say, 4 years ago. But yeah, I think they genuinely believe that. And I think we talked a little bit about it during the offseason, the beginning of the season, how we noticed kind of a bit of an evolution in the culture on this team and just the confidence and poise within these players. And this has kind of run counter to that, what we've seen these last couple of weeks. But yeah, I think there's a sense of that on the team, but it's going to have to bear itself out in the results.
So I'll stick with you, and I'm going to ask you this. If that's what they're thinking, and they know that they're better than this, and they know that this is a rough patch, but they're going to get through it, or they're confident they will anyway, do they need to do anything? Like, if they're feeling that way, does Tippett feel that way? Does Holland feel that way? Do they need to do something now? Like, what would you do? Would you just let this ride itself out and realize it's going to end at some point? Or would you try to make a change and do something to shake this up a little bit?
I would stick with it as is for now. And I say that too. Part of it, the fact is that it's just going to be so difficult for this team to make any significant moves with the pieces they have and where they're at with the salary cap. But I think you give this group a chance. They've shown so much promise and potential here to start the season. They've hit a rough patch. They believe they can get out of it. Show them as ownership, as general managers, coaches, that you believe in them. Give them an opportunity to get out of it, and I think that can go a long way to growing themselves and maturing as players. And if they don't, well, then you obviously do have to make a move, or two or three.
It would certainly be something if they were able to work themselves out of it, right? Like, that would be a lesson well taught for them.
Yeah.
That they're like, okay, you know what? We can do this. We don't need.
I mean, every championship team has to go through that. You can look over the history. I mean, we talked about the most recent example, I think, is Tampa Bay and what they went through in 2019. And look how they emerged from that. And they did not blow that thing up. They gave that team, that group of players, a chance to come out and improve themselves. And, here they are 2 years later, back-to-back champs.
Yeah, and it's funny how nobody looked at that Tampa Bay team and their loss to Columbus like, oh my gosh, this Tampa Bay team is terrible, right? Like, nobody looked at it that way. They just knew it was Tampa, and they knew that they could turn it around. But I don't think anybody feels that way about the Oilers yet, right? Because the Oilers haven't proven it. They haven't been able to win when it counts. So they don't have that reputation of being a team that can turn it around, even though they might think they can. And there's this hint that they can. Now, Julian, you mentioned third line center is an issue. There's some defensive holes that they addressed, but there's still some problems there. So if you're suggesting that maybe those are fixes that still need to happen at this point or some point this season, would you make a change now? Would you look to make a change right away? Would you try to add something as soon as possible?
I mean, the thing for me is I like what Brian said in letting them try and work it out. The adversity is something they need to go through and learn from. And like you said, all teams go through that. Look at the Blues. The Blues were rock bottom in December, came back in 2019, won the Cup. So that has to happen. They ride it out. It's too early to make any significant moves to me. And the players have to prove to management that they're good enough for him to make the moves. Why is he going to blow up the team mid-season? Why is he going to trade future draft picks if you guys aren't proving on the ice that you need my help? If you need my help, then the players on the ice need to show him that we need reinforcements to get us the rest of the way, kind of thing. It's more of a prove yourself on the ice, right? So they got to figure it out by themselves first before Holland is able to make any moves. But I think there is value if Holland were to come out in a presser and say, this is the team we have right now. We're gonna ride it out, and they need to figure out what's going on internally and figure out ways to fix it and play better. And that's the only way they're going to learn. And at the end, just reiterate that if they prove to me that they need the help, then I'll get them the help when it's time.
Colton, do you agree that it's not necessarily time to do anything yet? Let's remove the fact that maybe it's really hard to do anything right now, but it's not necessarily time. Let them work it out. But do you also believe that this team has sufficient needs that need to be addressed before the trade deadline?
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with it. Like, I get where the guys are coming from. Just my thing is, like, we've said it for a while, they're in a win now mode. Like, they have McDavid and Draisaitl in the prime of their careers, and it's like, I do think eventually something has to get done, even if they were still winning, just to add another piece, like whether you have prospects, picks. I just don't think it does you much service to keep holding on to these guys and hoping they develop so that McDavid and Draisaitl have guys to play with, as opposed to getting them some players now. I just think you're really risking by the time their deals are up. And I know that's still quite a ways away, but it is creeping up, and like, you're risking losing them, I think, because they're still stuck in this rut where they're a good regular season team when those two are performing, but as soon as one of them goes down with injury or just isn't a slump like right now, they really struggle. So I don't think it's the worst thing for Holland to try and go out and maybe add something, even if it's not a huge pickup, just to show them that he's willing to try and help them out. But like you said, it is really hard to make moves in the middle of the season.
I'm kind of curious as to what it says if a move does need to be made. Like, is this on the players or is this on Ken Holland? I kind of believe it's on Holland, right? Like, I wonder if what he didn't do or did do this offseason, he should have known. Maybe didn't do enough, right? Like, if the Oilers can't necessarily, I'm sure they will, but if they can't get themselves back to a level they were at to start the season, does that speak to the moves that Holland made and what he didn't get that he should have? Like, we talk about, Duncan Keith as a second line left shot defense. We talk about signing Barrie after you got Evan Bouchard. We talked about the Warren Foegele for Ethan Bear trade. We talked about Derek Ryan. We talked about all these additions, and many of us questioned whether or not they were the right fit. We thought they could be good, but we didn't know for sure, right? And now we're finding out that maybe in this 9-1 streak, the Oilers didn't play as good as they could have, but they got the wins they needed, and now they're not getting those wins. Is that a Holland thing? Or is that the Oilers not necessarily being good enough and they can be better? Brian, what do you think? Like, do you think it's the Oilers just not playing up to the ability that they're capable of, or that Holland didn't quite address what he should have and maybe needed to do a better job in the offseason?
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, I think, and just some bad puck luck right now. Perfect storm. Everything's going wrong.
When it rains, it pours, man.
That's right. I was going to lob a live grenade though into the pass point there. Just like, I want to get your guys' opinion on this. We're talking about making a move. What if that move is, and I'm not saying I think this should be done, but what if that move is a coaching change? Is that what maybe, because that's a lot easier to do than trying to acquire pieces at this time of year, fit somebody under the salary cap, get somebody who can really help this team. Because that's been rumbling now in the last, there's been a growing discontent with Dave Tippett, I would say, over the last week or so. It's amazing how quickly these things turn. And I know he's in COVID protocol right now.
I was just going to say, I would probably argue that we're finding out for the next week what a new coach would look like, right? Like, yes, it's a little different situation when you got Galton and Playford working together, but this is what it would look like if Tippett were gone.
So what if they reel off like 4 wins here, Tippett comes back and they go right back into the tank?
I think you have part of your answer.
Right? Yeah, that would be telling. I'm not sure. I think it's couple games before you have to make that decision. If they keep on this slide, then it's not really I think they need at least to lose another 2 or 3 games out of the next 5 for them to start thinking about firing Tippett, even if he's not around, because the systems are still probably his that they're implementing. It's not like a new, you know what I mean? There's still going to be Tippett's styles and stuff like that. So,
and Colton, I think it was you, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, mentioned on our message board internally at the Hockey Writers about the idea of moving Tippett, but you certainly wouldn't want to do it now, not while he's out of commission. Was that you, Colton, that sent that message today?
I don't know. But just going off of that, I do I've seen all the Tippett stuff lately too, and there are some things that kind of bug me about Tippett, just the constant line changes and everything. But overall, I do like him as a coach. I think since he's come in, the group has played just a better styled approach. I think it's less run and gun and more structured. But I don't know. I think at some point, it's just, and I know he's been there for a bit now, but there still seems like there's just this constant gauntlet of coaches in Edmonton. How many coaches has Nugent Hopkins had already? I think at some point, I think it's out of the coach's control. I think it's the players he's given. And I think that goes back to Holland again this offseason. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Tippett goes, and if they think they need that to get a spark, then I guess go ahead. But I don't really think this is on him.
Yeah, I mean, I asked the question, but for one, just personal opinion, I would not fire Dave Tippett.
Yeah, and for the record, I wouldn't either. But
yeah.
We see coaches get, it
happens so fast.
Yeah, how many coaches have the Flames gone through in the last few years, right? And it seems every time they make the move, they get the initial bump. And they might make a nice run, and then a year later, the guy can't coach his way out of a paper bag, and he's gone. It's
well, and that's the cycle, right? That's the vicious cycle, because you bring in somebody who might not be the ideal coach that you want, so you're not getting the candidate that might be perfect for the job. There's things about Tippett that drive people crazy. There's things about Tippett that drive me crazy. I don't understand why he might split up a line right when they're at their hottest point. I don't understand why he might, continually put Draisaitl and McDavid together on a line when they probably should be separated. Some of those things will drive you crazy, but that can be said about any coach in the NHL on any team, right? If you're a fan of another team, I'm sure you felt this way about your coach before, right? It is what it is. And when you lose 6 games in a row, the most natural reaction is fire the coach. It's awful. You got to do something, right? It's the easiest scapegoat that you have is to blame the coach. But I don't think Tippett's a bad coach. I just think he makes the same kind of silly mistakes most coaches make. And you wish he didn't, but he does. And everybody's going to do it. They're humans. They're not perfect.
Yeah. Going back to the Holland versus the players, whose fault is it kind of thing. But to me, everybody was fine and dandy when he started off the season hot, right? So nothing changed between personnel between that time besides injuries. So you lose some of those guys.
About Holland for GM of the year on one episode.
Yeah. And he put all the pieces, his chess pieces in place, and it was working out for the first half. They lost some key guys to injuries, and people have stepped up and they did okay. They were weathering the storm through those injuries on the defensive side. And I don't know what all of a sudden happened, but it seems like they got too high on their horse and the cliff just came. And it's almost like, they're kind of pointing fingers as to who needs to or what are you doing? What are we doing? They're all confused. I'm not sure. I think to me, it's still on the players. The accountability has to be with each other. It seems like they don't know who's going to get them out of this. Everyone's looking at McDavid and Draisaitl, but nobody else is pulling their weight. You know what I mean? So I think to me, it's on the players because everybody keeps pointing fingers, but nobody's contributing to have the answer. To have a fourth line that, barely contributes, that's kind of hurting your team. Not to say, kick teams while they're down, but the Leafs, they've been getting, help from their depth, even when guys have been out. Right. So, Spezza, he's 40 years old and they're still getting something out of him, there's guys that need to start contributing and the Oilers just aren't getting that right now. Well,
and to your point, when the Leafs were not playing well, they weren't getting that. They got Spezza. That was it. There was no other bottom 6 forward doing anything. Right. And that's one of the reasons, like you said, why they weren't being successful. But I will say this, I agree with you with the players thing. And I think they understand that. Leon Draisaitl was in practice 20 minutes early today, taking one-timers. He's the first one to show up. He's arguably been the best Oiler this year. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's on a little bit of a skid, but he's still producing, and he's the guy at practice 20 minutes early taking one-timers. If there's a dude that probably doesn't need to take them, it's him, but it's because he missed a wide open net. So in his head, he's like, "Oh man, I got to do something, right?"
It's a funk. It's a funk. They got to find a way out of the funk. That's all.
I want to talk a little bit about the injuries. Colton, I'll start with you. What do you make of the Zach Hyman thing? Like, how serious do you think this is? We heard it looked pretty nasty when it happened. We figured maybe day to day. They said don't rule him out. He did not play on Tuesday night. I don't know if he's going to play on Thursday. Game time decision. It looked pretty nasty. Do you think this is one of those things where it might be worse than they're letting on, or this dude's just tough, he's going to fight through it, and it's probably not out for long term?
Well, it wouldn't be the first time that's happened this season, because they said Smith was day to day, and he still isn't back. So I hope that it's not much longer, because it's like, I think you even realized this last night, like they really do miss him. He's like a really good energy guy for them, and they really don't. I mean, we talked about it enough. They don't have depth. So when a guy like that is out of the lineup, they really are limited on who to replace him with. Like Julian said, they don't have really anyone in that bottom six is putting up offense. So when a guy like that is missing time, like if he misses a bunch, I think that's going to be the biggest injury they've had yet, or the most significant.
Do you know Hyman, Julian, and how tough that dude is and what he's played through and injuries and stuff like that? Is this a situation where if he's kind of like, let's say 75%, do you hold him out knowing the Oilers are on a 6-game skid and could really use him? And then maybe you risk he comes back too early, or do you wait and just go, you know what? He's not where we need him. Nobody probably arguably ever plays at 100% in the NHL. We know that, but you don't want to put him in and risk making it worse. So what would you do if you're like, he's like 75%?
Yeah. Did they say what it actually was, the injury, upper body or lower body?
I don't know that they made it.
I don't think they've really, I don't think they really said
it had to be upper body. I mean, he was driven.
Yeah. If it was, it was his shoulder,
right?
I think. So
yeah.
If it was lower body, I'd probably be more cautious, but upper body, I think, if he's ready, I think he wants to play in the game yesterday against the Leafs. And, it was more being safe than sorry, just because it was such a new injury. So I think he'll be out just a couple more days. I don't think it'll be a long absence, but I would probably just kind of wait it out because of his history and knowing the investment you made in him. I'd rather just make sure he's healthy before something else happens or that injury gets worse. Right. But I think the Mike Smith injury, you're starting to see the wear and tear on Koskinen now too, where he was good against Carolina on the Saturday night when they played and he had that. He was good at times, I should say. I won't say he was good throughout the whole game, because that second goal was one that they would have back. There's still those blunders that happen. It's costing them some games. So I think that freshness of Mike Smith, if he can get back soon, would be a big boost for them. But in terms of even just altering things around, like I think Foegele played really well on that top line with McDavid in place of Hyman. And I think that kind of gives him some versatility, so you can kind of level out your lines more. So if Foegele can give you that with McDavid and kind of play the similar role, maybe Hyman can be used more on a second or third line and bump everybody back down to get other guys going. Like he's an energizer guy. He makes players around him better and work harder. So I think that he can be more of a spark plug to plug in throughout the lineup to get other guys going.
Warren Fogel's an interesting guy. I don't remember an Oiler playing better but never scoring. Like, that guy is all over the ice, but he just can't seem to put one in for whatever reason. Brian, I saw you shaking your head a little bit about when he's talked about Hyman on the third line. I'm going to ask you this, because there's no Ryan McLeod right now, COVID protocol, things like that. He's kind of your third line center. So do you move Hyman down there knowing you're missing kind of that speed, your guy that you had pegged for the third line? Like, is that even more of a reason to move more skill down to that? There was some talk today about Ryan Nugent-Hopkins going back down to third line center and filling that role in. Like, what would you do knowing that Ryan McLeod is out too?
Yeah, I guess that's kind of that puts a different twist on the situation. But I was actually nodding in agreement with Julian there. Like, I like that idea. I like the idea of spreading out that depth. I think something needs to be done. I'll actually have an article about this tomorrow or today when everyone's watching this, about Yamamoto needs to come off the second line. Like, he's just not contributing. And if you look at who he's played with, and it's gotten to the point where this is getting ridiculous. Like, and Julian, he brought it up earlier tonight on this episode. He said it last episode too. This team needs to have a top 2 talent playing on the bottom, or a top 6 talent playing on the third line. And right now they have bottom 6 talent playing on the second line. They need to figure out a way to get more depth scoring to balance this out. And I think that would do that. Now, having said that, with Ryan McLeod's situation right now, that might make it a little bit trickier to do. But like you said, with Hyman's versatility, I think that does give you some options to kind of maybe play with some line combinations we haven't seen yet that allow the talent to be spread out more.
And what does it hurt, right? Because
yes,
you're already 6 games down. Throw the lines in a blender and see who's going to play well.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask Colton. I was going to say, what would you do if you're Galton Playfair and the whole debate about Draisaitl and McDavid playing together? When you're on a 6-game skid and you're like, we need a win so badly. Do you keep Draisaitl and McDavid together because you know that line probably has the best potential to just explode and get you 4 or 5 goals a night? Or do you split them up because everybody talks about how they need to be driving their own lines and you get better balance that way? What do you do if you're trying to, get that win like Columbus on Thursday? What do you go with here?
Yeah, so it's you guys might disagree with this, but I'm in the mindset that I like them split up for the majority of time in the playoffs and everything. I think it's best just because otherwise teams can match up easier. But I think when they're looking for a win like this, you have 2 of the best players in the NHL. I think play them together. They like playing together. And I think, like you said, just hope that they can snap out of this and really both pop off together. Like I said, I know you guys might agree because I do think that trying out different line combinations, like Julian said, it doesn't hurt right now. But I just think the best chance to win and snap out of this right now is playing those 2 together.
Yeah, I would have been with Julian if this was like loss 3 or 4, right? Like now that you're on loss 6, loss 7 is a big deal. Loss 8 is huge, right? Like you're at the territory now where more consecutive losses just get uglier and uglier and uglier.
But
at some point, you just got to
tried that though. You know what I mean? Like they should have tried that. If they're going to put like their loss 3, like what does it hurt to throw everything in a blender, right? And they haven't even done that yet, really.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like they should have done it then. I don't know if they've passed that opportunity now. You know what I mean? Like they've missed the boat.
Because it could just snowball to be something worse. I hear what you're saying too, but I mean, without having tried it, I think I like the idea of having the 3 centers on a line to say, you know what, like let's have McDavid with Puljujarvi as take 2 guys and plug in a third. That's what I would kind of do. And McDavid and Puljujarvi, you got, let's say, Draisaitl with, pardon?
I was going to say you could do with McDavid, Puljujarvi, and Foegele.
Yeah, exactly. That I would go with that for sure because I like what they kind of provided, and then give Draisaitl someone like Cassian or something, bang bodies and stuff like that, and then put Hyman with Nuge or something like that on the third line. Spread it out because putting that skill on the third line when you're matched up against weaker opposition might get something to break through there too, right? So I mean, I'm all for mixing and matching right now.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to shake them out of it. Like, I'm assuming that they played pretty well against Toronto. They just, like I said, they just couldn't score. The goalies, Jack Hamill was fantastic, right? And Frederick Anderson was fantastic the game before that. They just couldn't beat these guys, right? And they were beating Koskinen on those 1s or 2s. All right, to close the show, I'd like to switch gears completely and talk about something else totally. Colton, I'll start with you. There's a lot of news about the Olympics and what's going to happen here, whether or not the NHL is going to allow players to go. Well, they're going to allow it, but if the players themselves are going to decide to want to go with talking about the 3 to 5 week quarantine, there's not a lot of information yet. All we know is that if they get sick while they're in China, they might be stuck there for a while, which of course raises questions about, okay, well, what happens if you can't get back? You're not going to get paid by the NHL. You've got your family and friends that are waiting for you to come back. There's all this stuff about what's happened over there with other Olympic athletes. What do you do? Oilers have a lot of guys potentially who could be on the list. Like, you got Draisaitl for Germany, McDavid obviously for Canada, maybe Darnell Nurse, maybe Zach Hyman. You've got a handful of people that are massive losses if they don't come back. I mean, they'll eventually come back, but who knows, right? Like, what would you do? Are you thinking best if the players don't go to the Olympics, or are you still like, no, 100% I'd like to see these guys play in the Olympics?
I mean, it's a bit of both. Like, I was really excited in September when they said that the Olympics, the NHL was attending. But like you said, like if McDavid goes there and tests positive and doesn't come back for 5 weeks, like the Oilers are done. So I think, I don't know. I know if I was a player with those rules, I think I would be very hesitant on going. I would probably be leaning towards no, like, especially like you said, the guys with the families, if they have to be gone for 2 weeks for the Olympics plus another 5, like that's just a long time to be away, especially in another country. So I think it's very, at this point, I don't expect to see NHL players attending. I hope I'm wrong, but I just can't see it right now.
Brian, what do you, the most we've heard is like 50-50. There's a lot of insiders talking about the fact that this is the most they've ever heard that the players might be leaning away from it. And we've heard a little bit of both, right? We've heard like Alex Pietrangelo, he's like, yeah, I don't think I'll probably go. And then you've heard like Darnell Nurse, who said on after, I was like, yeah, I probably still want to go, right? And Leon Draisaitl, yeah, I'd still like to go if I can. Like, so there's both, right? Where would you be on one, if you were a player in this situation, and two, what it could mean for the Oilers if things go wrong?
Yeah, well, this situation is very fluid. I think it's moving pretty quickly. Darnell Nurse said that on Saturday. His mind might be different the middle of the week now. Like even this afternoon, Craig Button was saying that he said, I think almost a 0% chance that he thought they'd be going now. It's escalated quickly, and I understand why. I think there's a lot of reasons why you wouldn't want to go as a player. Colton just outlined several of them. I wouldn't go if I was a player. I understand why they would not go. I don't think they will go. And if they do, I think every NHL team's on pins and needles because the Olympics is the best of the best. So all the best players are going to be there. That means every team's star players are there. And every team is then now at risk of having their star players get stuck over there. I mean, just as easily as Connor McDavid could get there, Austin Matthews could too, right? So it's an unfortunate situation, but that's the world in 2021, 2022.
Julian, do you think it changes for certain players? Like we always talk about how much Alex Ovechkin's always like, I'm going. Like, I think he worked it into his contract. Like when he negotiated his next deal, like he's like, I'm going, right? Like, I don't care. I'm going. Like, do you think like everybody else pulls out and even he goes, or is it going to be one of those things where it's just so blatantly obvious that they can't go, that it's the decisions somewhat made for them?
I think a lot of the European skaters love to go back and play in those type of tournaments. So it doesn't really surprise me, but I think the percentage of it happening is dropping rapidly, like we've been saying, and even the insiders have kind of been hinting at that. And I think one of the main concerns, I think I heard Elliot Friedman was talking about it, about, working a way to have a bigger pot to pull from if these guys are quarantining to pay them for the NHLPA. That's something they want to work on because I think they had $5 million set aside, and they're saying, what if we need more now? Because if we're there for you guys are there for 5 weeks. So I think that's something that if that gets worked out, I think that would bump up the odds of it happening. I think it's going to be entirely up to the players to, case by case basis, depending on if they have families or not, because those who don't probably would be more, inclined to do it. Yeah. Or if some people, some players might just say, this might be my last crack at it. And, I got nothing to lose at this point. So I'm going to do it. Right. So it's going to be a total personal decision. And I think at the end of the line, even if the star players don't go, there's going to be some tier of player that as you go down the list, that's going to say yes. So I think you could still put teams together. I don't think it's wise maybe for it to happen, especially if I'm an owner of these guys paying these players to go make a playoff run and they're missing 5 weeks. That could be the difference of your team making it or not.
Yeah.
In the NHL, right?
Yeah.
So,
and there's not much the owners or the NHL can really do because they worked it into the collective bargaining agreement. Exactly. They said they would be open to it. Right. So I guess no matter what happens, something has to be done where this decision is made for everybody. Otherwise, the NHL is going to be like, okay, like you can go, but we think it's a bad idea. It's all up to you, right?
Yep.
And we're not going to help you. Like they said, the $5 million fund, that's not going very far. Like if 2 or 3 guys get stuck there, that's going to last all of a day, right? Like what are these guys making a minute? You know what I mean? Like it's just when you add that many star players up, it's the $5 million is going to be gone like that. So it's it's just not very much. Anyway, it'll be interesting. As people watch this video, Columbus Blue Jackets tonight, let's do a quick round. Let's hope that everybody believes the Oilers are going to get out of this. Colton, what do you figure the score is going to be against Columbus?
Oh, God. I'll give the Oilers a win. I'll say they win 4-1.
All right. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, well, first off, I predicted the Oilers last week were going to go unbeaten on the rest of their homestand.
I know. Did we not totally get that wrong? What did I say? This would be a really good chance for them to prove themselves on this big homestand. Oh, my God, it's been awful.
So with that in mind, I'm predicting a 6-2 win tomorrow night.
What about you, Julian?
We haven't done really well. We even tried to not record on Tuesdays, but that hasn't worked either.
Yeah.
So
I wasn't sick at all. I'm just like, no, I'm not doing it.
Not today. No, but I think I went against them the other day because of the Leafs, but I'm back on them tonight. So I'm going to say they win. I'll say 4-2.
I'm not going to call it a blowout, but my prediction, I'm hoping, is that they finally get a lot of power plays and they capitalize on them. And it's like a 5-3. You know what I mean? Like they explode offensively. They get some goals. It's never really in doubt. And they capitalize on 2 or 3 power plays that are called and they just hit them because they haven't been wonderful lately. It's been a real problem for the team. So if they can do that, it should be all right. Columbus is a tough team though. Like they might not be the most skilled team in the world, but they're a hard out no matter what you do, right? They're that team that just, they don't go down easy. So hopefully this is a winnable game for the Oilers. We'll see if it happens. All right, guys. Quick reminder for anybody watching this, there's a couple ways that you can get a hold of us. Obviously the Hockey Writer on Twitter. You can sign up for the morningskate.io newsletter if you want to get your little tidbit of NHL action every morning. You can sign up for that. Check out the YouTube page, obviously the hockeywriters.com and the Hockey Writers on Facebook. So we appreciate you guys joining us for another edition of THW Oilers Overtime. On behalf of myself, Jim, Colton, Julian, Brian, we thank you. I don't know what we're guys going to do. We'll have to decide what we're going to do over the holidays because what's next week? Like the 22nd, right?
We're getting close.
It might be just far enough that we could probably do one more episode before the break.
I think we can.
I think we'll try.
Especially if they start winning. I don't want to speak for you guys. I'm open to doing it, but if it were like the 23rd or 24th, that probably wouldn't be. But the 22nd, I should be.
Yeah, we'll fit it in there.
Right on. All right, guys. Well, we'll talk to you guys next week. Thanks again.
Yep.
Take care, everybody.